Looks fresh and fit.
Fresh and Fit. That's our podcast.
No.
Welcome to the Fresh and Fit podcast. So I am very serious. That creepy little door behind you creeps me out, and I don't like it.
I didn't think about it until you said something, but now I'm closing it. But it's probably going to pop open while we're recording and scare the bejesus out of me. So thanks for that.
We're up in Maddie's loft.
It's
And
a
there's a
spooky
creepy
vibe.
little door. There's
Yeah.
a creepy little door behind him, as there is sometimes in attics. And it was open. And it was open. It's been open.
Yeah, we're not gonna think about that anymore. we're gonna move on to the show.
So
Hey.
anyway,
Oh. Hello and welcome to another episode of Horror / Stories.
I'm Sarah.
And I'm Matty.
And we are siblings who just enjoy watching horror movies and talking about them.
Yes, we do, and we are excited to be back.
And talking about them with you. And today we are talking about the 2023 Argentinian horror movie When Evil Lurks by Demián Rugna.
And let me tell you, evil lurked.
Did evil lurk? It lurked. But before we get into that, Maddie, have you seen any other scary movies recently beyond the one we're about to talk about?
What? Me? Watch horror movies in between recording sessions? Yes. Yes, I did. I watched this movie that really intrigued me. I was thinking about maybe waiting to watch it with you for the podcast, but I ended up watching it on my own.
You wouldn't wait for me. Why would you wait?
No, I couldn't wait. It was called Late Night with the Devil, and I don't really know who directed it or when it came out.
That's not what this podcast is about, man.
Oh, yeah. Well, good. I'm in the right place then. But yeah, I didn't know too much about it. It had an indie vibe. It seemed like a lower budget movie. They used a lot of cool old school practical effects. And I gotta say, it was great. The actors did a
awesome.
great job. It was a very original concept. Well done. I can't wait to see what they produce next.
I'm glad you enjoyed this movie you watched without me.
I'm sorry. How about you? Did you watch any horror movies since we last recorded?
I've watched a few. Yeah. So I guess I just called you out for watching movies without me when I've watched a few without you.
Shenanigans.
One of them was Longlegs, which is one that, based on the commercials, I thought I should watch with Maddie, because if you saw the commercials, they were saying this is the scariest movie of the year. The commercials actually did look pretty scary.
Mm-hmm.
However, my new theory is the scarier the commercial, the less scary the actual movie. I mean, for example, if you watch the trailer for Five Nights at Freddy's, it is scarier than the movie itself.
I agree. And like, I don't know whether it's like a confidence thing, like if they have to like compensate for the movie by making the commercials real scary or something like that. But I've noticed that like also like the longer a trailer is, or like the more of the plot or the theme they give away, usually the less scary it is. And I've had that experience with films I've really liked. Like, for example, actually Bodies, which we talked about in a previous episode, was kind of like that, where the trailer looked really scary and the movie, which was scary at parts, was totally different than I expected.
Totally different. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I agree with that. And I think we're both Nicolas Cage fans.
Oh yeah, I mean,
Like, actually, not even
yeah.
ironically.
I think it started out ironic for me, where I was like, oh, what a meme, what a goofy guy, and now I'm just like, he is such a unique performer. He's a master of his own niche, and he's a lot more self-aware than I realized.
I don't even think this was a delusional thing. I think it was a marketing scheme to get money, and I think it worked because it got us to the theater.
That's true. I have heard a lot about this movie from a lot of different people.
So I guess the long story short is that it was not scary. I would consider myself on the scale of like beginner to I have no triggers. I can watch anything and sleep like a baby. I'm probably a medium. I'm right in the middle. Like I'm a medium scaredy cat. And this movie did not scare me at all. I would say it's more of a psychological thriller like Silence of the Lambs than it is a horror movie. However, Silence of the Lambs actually scared me. Still scares me. This was not even as scary as Silence of the Lambs. There is a little bit of gore, maybe some creepy elements. If dolls creep you out, this will probably creep you out, but it for me was not scary at all. Ben and I were honestly, my husband and I were laughing during the end credits.
Cool. I'm very excited to watch it because
I do recommend it.
It does seem like worthwhile, and also
it was a lot of fun. Actually,
put Nicolas Cage in anything, I will watch it.
We were very entertained, and that was another. This is not a horror movie I was going to talk about, but we did watch the movie Mandy recently, which is a 2018 Nicolas Cage movie, and I cannot recommend it highly enough. It is unhinged. It is Nicolas Cage. It is Nicolas Cageiest. It is 80s everything. I don't know, drugs and 80s, and it starts out really slowly, and at the beginning, I think we were, 15 minutes in, and I was ready to stop watching, but we kept watching, and do keep watching. Watch it, and do keep watching, because it's worth it. It goes places. It was a lot of fun, and I'm glad we stuck with it.
That's so funny that you watched another Nicolas Cage movie, because just on a whim, I got together with my friend yesterday and we watched National Treasure, which is like the iconic Nicolas Cage movie.
It is the iconic.
I mean, there's so many iconic Nicolas Cage movies, but that was definitely
my
first Nicolas Cage movie. And I mean, if you haven't seen National Treasure at this point,
what are you doing with your life?
What are you doing? Especially if you live in America, it's a true American film.
So another movie we watched, and this was one I never thought I would actually watch. This is one that Ben had been watching. I guess, shout out Ben. Shout out my husband, who's going to come up on this podcast.
We love Ben. Ben, come on our podcast.
I genuinely do love him. You wouldn't expect that, but...
you wouldn't expect that you married him.
That I love my husband. He's been wanting to watch this movie for a long time. It stars Viggo Mortensen and Kristen Stewart, and I'm so sorry for my mispronunciation. Léa Seydoux.
Sure.
French name, I think.
I'll take your word for it.
Oh my God, I'm so sorry to Leia and everyone who's listening to this podcast. Anyway, it's a David Cronenberg film. Do you know about the Cronenbergs?
So I probably, like most people, know about Cronenberg stuff from Rick and Morty.
Yeah, fair.
I'm Cronenberg curious. That's the limit of my knowledge.
Curious.
I'm Cronin curious. I identify that way.
Yeah, so it's basically a lot of weird body horror is what they're known for. And watching the trailer, again, this was one where the trailer made me really uncomfortable. I thought I would be really uncomfortable with this film. I had told Ben, I think I'm going to have to be on my phone. If it gets gross, I'm just going to I'm going to edit photos on my phone. I'll hang out. I'll be next to you. I'll be watching it. Sometimes when in marriage, you have to compromise. And that means watching a movie that might be kind of gross. But I was like, you know what? I'm going to try to just actually watch it. I'm going to be present. And I did. And it was not scary. It was not even that gross. There is body horror. At one point, Viggo Mortensen gets a zipper installed across his stomach. And then, I'm so sorry, Léa Seydoux she unzips his stomach. She's his performance partner. And she, licks his stomach, I guess, his guts. There's a lot of just stuff like that, but it wasn't gross to me. Well, the movie that we are about to talk to about today is a lot grosser. Okay, so we're going to talk today about When Evil Lurks, a movie I watched through my fingers.
Yes, and what's funny is that I remember you at the beginning of the movie, you were like, is it okay if I'm on my phone? And I was like, no, absolutely not. And you were like, but I might get scared. And I was just like, no, you have to watch this and be scared with me because I'm a brother and that's what brothers are there for, is to force their sisters to be scared.
Yeah. So that's a question I get sometimes is why do you watch scary movies, horror movies, if they scare you? Like, do you ever, there is no point in my time as a horror movie enthusiast that I have not gotten scared or gotten over being scared. I'm less scared, I'm less affected than I was, 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
But I still, if I see something disturbing, it will be in my mind and it will not leave my mind. So that is something that I'm very aware of. When we watched Annabelle during the film, I was not scared at all, and then when I got home I couldn't sleep. I would not consider that a scary movie, but there were one or two moments in that movie that were disturbing and scary enough that I couldn't sleep.
It had the linger effect,
It had the linger effect.
We will talk about pretty much every episode as we assess these movies.
Yeah, does it linger? Does it stay with you?
Yeah, it's so funny because like we watch so many scary movies together, and you're saying you're like a medium, like fear tolerance. I consider myself to be pretty high scare tolerance. Not much phases me. I've probably said that in previous episodes. Like there'll be times where I'll be watching with other people and they'll all be hiding behind their blankets and I'll just be like, oh wow, oh I love the metaphor here, or like something like that. This movie was not like that. I was scared.
And I loved that because, yeah, not a lot scares you. And even though I was not, so before we started watching this movie, I was fascinated by it. I never, as I was saying, thought I was going to watch it. I'd listened to so many podcast episodes describing in detail what happened. I knew the plot. I thought I knew it fairly well, but there was still a lot that surprised me throughout the movie. But I knew what points to look away. So watching, experiencing those particular moments where Matty was watching and I was sitting there with my hand over my eyes. It was really interesting that you actually got scared because that's not a frequent occurrence. So I love that. But yeah, we're going to start talking about the theme of possession. I think that's going to be something we explore as a little bit of a mini series on this podcast. Mm-hmm. Does possession scare you?
I would say absolutely yes. Possession scares me. It's one of the topics I'm more drawn to in horror movies for that reason. And I think the reason that I find it scary is because let's be honest, most people have anxious voices and
Sounds like you're possessed.
I might be possessed. But it's like possession really speaks to that part that comes alive, when you're going through hard times, where you kind of get this fear of like, oh no, I'm like starting to like have these like more troubling thoughts and like the fear of like, oh, what if that took the steering wheel, and I was just like left helpless, as these problematic parts like affected my relationships and stuff like that. And also just like the dark history of the way that possession has been used to demonize a lot of mental health issues in human history. Like in the olden days where we didn't really understand a lot of mental health, a lot of very human, very normal, very common, mental health conditions such as like bipolar or depression or schizophrenia or dissociative identity disorder were mislabeled as demonic possessions and treated very cruelly, and that's another topic of horror that scares me is like the way that mental institutions treated people in the olden days.
So that's maybe even something that's interesting to continue to explore as we're watching these possession films is how is the possessed evil? Like, regardless of how they're portrayed, let's take a step back. Like, is this possessed evil and how do others react to that?
Yeah, and especially like with some of the like the Warren films that we might discuss where like claims of demonic possession made it way into like the court systems and stuff like that. Like that's going to be a really interesting topic to discuss. Also, on a personal note, my partner is a therapist who specializes in internal family systems, which deals with parts work and this idea that as we grow up, we have different parts that represent different stages of growth, and they can be integrated or disintegrated depending on what conditions or what trauma we had at that stage in our life, and they're all like a part of us. And there's like a really big theme in internal family systems of like no bad parts, where like you're supposed to love all your parts, and like possession kind of reckons with that, so it's a really fascinating topic, definitely scares me.
And it's so interesting when we consider this film, because one of the main characters in the film has a complicated history with his family where he potentially wasn't able to love his family for like wholly. So should we talk about the movie?
We should, and I think maybe a brief summary is in order. I know you bravely volunteered to do our 60-second summary.
I will do my best.
Which I'm very grateful for, because these stress me out.
I should also say that after we watched the movie, dear Ben let me tell him the entire plot of the movie from start to finish. And that is my love language. Like, not everyone would do that. The fact that he would sit there and listen to me tell him in detail this movie. Thank you, Ben. I love you so much.
And as your brother, I can tell you I would absolutely not allow that or tolerate that. I would be like, shut the hell up. So shout out, Ben. You're a saint. We love you.
Let's do this 60-second summary.
Okay. Are you ready?
As ready as I'm going to be.
Okay. 60 seconds on the clock. On your mark, get set, summarize.
Okay. Very rural Argentina. We have two brothers, Pedro and Jaime. They find a torn apart man on their property. It seems like he's going to see their neighbor. They go to their neighbor's house. They find a rotten, which is basically a person who is gestating a demon on their neighbor's property. They got to get rid of that guy. So they try to, with the help of another neighbor, take him outside of town. They all kind of know about demons in this little world, but they don't deal with them often. That's something that happens in the city. That is not a rural issue. So they take the rotten outside the city. They lose him, but they're like, whatever, he's far enough away. Then Pedro and Jaime come back and they try to rescue Pedro's family, and everything goes wrong. Everything goes so wrong.
10 seconds.
And that is the movie.
And time. Damn, you had like 5 seconds to spare.
I don't know if I could have said anything else. I don't think I spoiled that much. I don't think I spoiled anything.
Honestly, I am so impressed.
Although, before we get too far into this, and I hope you recognize that by listening to this podcast, this is a horror movie podcast. We are going to be talking about disturbing and distressing topics. This is an extreme horror movie. This is one of probably the scariest movies we've ever seen.
Yes, and although you should expect that there will be some disturbing topics in a horror movie podcast, we will say that like this in particular has some particularly disturbing content.
It's not for beginners. We will include a few content warnings in the show notes, but I would particularly like to emphasize that there is child death.
Yes, so be mindful of that. If that's something that is a problem, please take care of yourself.
Yeah, we're going to do our best not to spoil anything or get into too graphic detail, but that's important to mention. Okay, let's get into it then. So, how did it feel watching an Argentinian horror movie, or a horror movie in a language that is not your native language, versus a horror movie that you watch in English?
Yeah, as we were talking about outside of the podcast, there's something about watching a movie in a language that you don't speak when it's horror that is particularly unsettling because you don't have the safety of being able to look away and listen to the dialogue. You have to read the subtitles, which means you have to look at the screen. And sometimes you really don't want to be looking at the screen.
Yeah.
So I would say that's a major factor in watching a movie with subtitles is there can be the potential for it to be scarier because you're a
You
captive
actually
audience a
have to
little bit.
watch the movie. You can't.
Yeah.
I could not, if I actually want to watch the movie, I could not be on my phone, as I was saying I would be. So, did the movie scare you while you were watching it?
100% yes.
Why
Yeah.
do you think that is?
Oh man, I think a big part of it was how unexpected some of the scares were.
Yeah, this was the film that, for the most part, happened in broad daylight.
Yeah, that was really wild. It's hard to do that. I think oddly enough, like a movie that does that comes to mind is Signs. Like the movie
funny.
Signs.
Signs is actually a scary movie.
I think a lot of people were traumatized by that movie when the alien walks by in that alleyway.
It's been a long time since I watched it, but I remember it being scary up until the end.
Yeah, the end was not scary at all. Yeah, so there was like this broad daylight element and this like element of like, oh, nothing feels safe.
Nothing is safe.
And the way that some of the scares came out of nowhere and in really original and innovative ways.
It's firing on all levels. You've got gore, you've got jump scares, you've got dread, you've got body horror. It's really chilling. Just any way that can make you feel fear or disgust, you are feeling it.
Yeah, 100%.
Supernatural, just general anxiety, tensions. It was one of those films. I feel like the baseline is Hereditary. That's where the baseline is.
Like the baseline for
a scary, like, hit firing on all levels.
Oh, okay, like the standard.
The standard.
Okay, yeah.
Because that's firing on all levels. You've got all of these different elements happening at once, where you have the things that are just scary about life, horrifying about life. You've got the supernatural, you've got the gore, you've got jump scares. It's this combination where you're feeling it. I guess I would ask normally about watching any horror movie, scary movie, where are you feeling it in your body? Because I think you feel different types of fear in different parts of your body. You might feel like a tension in your spine, or a discomfort in your stomach, where that's more of a gore situation, where it's disgust, where you almost feel physically sick, or you might feel it in your heart, in your chest, or you might feel it all throughout your body. So I guess, yeah.
Yeah, I think for this one, I definitely felt it in like all over at different times. Like there were times when the gore was like way too much for me. There were times when the hair was standing up on the back of my neck. There were times when I felt like I wanted to like hug myself and like, cower and curl up into the fetal position. It really hit on all levels. And the jump scares that were in the movie were not canned jump scares at all. Like there were jump scares that like were so original and just came out of nowhere and hit you in the face. Like there's one scene in particular, I won't say too much about it.
Can you give me one clue? One word.
Can I pet that dog?
Okay. Oh my God, that was the worst way you could possibly convey that clue, because it's so. Oh my gosh.
It was such a cute dog.
Yeah, and I was reading this article, this interview with Demián Rugna that I'm sure we can link in the show notes, but he was talking about working with that dog and choosing that dog, and he said that dog in particular was really hard to work with, just because it's not an animal that is typically, I don't know, a trained actor. And other people were suggesting, why don't you work with this type of dog or this type of dog that are stereotypically considered more aggressive? And he said, no, if I worked with this or this type of dog, people are going to immediately know something's up. They're immediately going to suspect. And so it's, again, with that daylight, with this adorable dog that when he patted onto the screen, you were just like, that's a really cute dog.
That level of attention to detail is really impressive.
That article was so funny because they're asking him questions like about the execution of, there are a few car crashes, and they ask him about the first car crash, and he says, well, the second car crash is better.
Oh my goodness. Wow. What a thorough individual. I mean,
Which
I
is
love
so
that.
funny.
I love when an artist is like, striving to be the best they can be. But you did a good job.
It's
We were scared.
it's so funny to see him being so critical of himself in this interview, because that was a film that I would really consider not just one of the scariest films I've ever seen through my fingers, but also extremely well executed.
Yeah, some of the themes just hit on so many different levels. Like just watching it, like I mean, there was like all of this idea of like rural culture and city culture kind of coming into conflict, and like especially like these kind of big problems that seem so far away in these cities, like kind of moving in to the rural areas, and themes of like systems of power not taking the concerns of the citizens seriously, like the government and the police like not really listening to the people who are asking for help. There was definitely like a feeling of like, I don't know, reminiscence of like COVID, of like people talking about like, oh, that's, that could never come here. Like we're too far away. We're too safe. And also just like some themes of like family, uh, like family tension, and like the way that like mental illness and patriarchy can affect things like custody of a child, and how, somebody who might have the best intentions can still be like a toxic, problematic person. Like I was really struck by the scene where if you want to call him the protagonist, he goes to try and warn
Pedro.
Pedro, yeah. He goes to try and like warn his ex-wife and his children about the danger, and like he kind of brings the problems to them, and
Yeah.
like that's such a real thing, like where you have the best of intentions and you end up you can end up like really harming people. And
Totally. I think you're hitting the nail on the head. Absolutely.
so I'm curious, like how does, those were just like my takeaways, but like how does that compare to like what you were reading about the director's intention?
So I read another quote, and I hope this makes sense out of context, but he says the original idea for the film came from all these plantation workers in Argentina who got sick. So the genesis came from the idea that instead of sickness spreading around, it would be an actual demon within a worker.
Whoa, that is pretty wild. But it felt resonant in ways that felt familiar. So he really did a good job of translating that.
And it sparks a curiosity. So I guess two moments I really want to talk about that I won't give too much away, but two moments I found particularly disturbing, and they were not even potentially the most disturbing moments in the film. One would be early on in the film when they are trying to transport the rotten, Uriel, who is bloated. Any kind of fluid or nastiness. And the cinematography is brilliant. They are making you look head on into the gore, into something that's going to make you very uncomfortable.
Okay, I like looking at the prosthetic, the character design of like Uriel. Like, I was so grossed out by that. Like, I wasn't even scared.
Absolutely.
Like at that point, I mean, I was a little scared at that point, but I was like, oh, like vomit response, and that's a testament to the makeup.
There was an actual moment where we weren't even looking at Uriel, we were looking at the truck where some gore was, and I was dry heaving.
Oh my gosh, I don't
Do you remember
that.
that?
No.
It was awful. But there was the particular moment that stood out to me. And again, I knew a lot of what was going to happen in this film, and this was something that no one would warn you about. They're trying to transport him, and they drop him. That was so disturbing to me.
Yeah, why do you think that was?
Oh, just dropping a human or any sort of living creature is always going to be disturbing, I think. Dropping someone who's helpless, even if they are gestating a demon, that's really uncomfortable.
I agree. There's like a involuntary like sympathetic response to that, where you're just like, oh.
Yeah. The other moment that really stood out to me. And this was a moment that visually, there is nothing overtly horrific about it. There is nothing, if you were to just watch this scene out of context, you might not notice anything. You might be confused why this is so scary. It is just a child walking into a room, saying he's cold, and asking his grandmother to make him some,
Oh my gosh.
I think, some tea.
I totally forgot about that scene. Yeah, I'm getting like chills thinking about it.
It is really
That
just
was
like a child
so scary.
walking into a room normally and asking his grandmother.
I have no idea how they set that up, but I just like the idea of
normally is not the right word. Just
right, just like taking something that you take for granted and just changing it in a certain way. Like, holy cow, that was, I think that's like where I was completely won over of like, oh, this is a masterpiece.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I know, Maddie, you will totally call me out for this, but the ending originally, I complained about the ending, and I think I just didn't want the movie to be over.
You did complain.
I complained about the ending, but in retrospect, or having some time to think about it, oh my God, there's a really gross spider over there. I do not like that.
Oh no, we've got a creepy door and a spider. Oh, but maybe he's gonna eat the mats in my apartment. Okay.
I liked the ending. In retrospect, I think the ending was brilliant.
Yeah, I remember you were just like, "What? That's it?" And so I'm glad that you've come around because I thought it was a really good ending.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I guess who would you recommend this movie for?
Oh, wow. Definitely not a beginner. If you're horror curious, you want to get into horror, this is not the movie, not the movie for you. You'll be very put off unless you're, I don't know, a freak like us.
I didn't even watch it. I loved it because I didn't watch it.
Yeah. So I'd say like I'd recommend this movie in particular to people who have like seen a lot of like American or English language horror. If you're somebody who knows your scare tolerance well and you're interested in like checking out international horror, I think that this is like a phenomenal film to watch, you know, and like it's artfully done, it's super scary, and it gives you a taste of like what you're missing by not watching more international horror.
I guess I would add to that and just say, if you are a person like Maddie who is not scared very often, this is a movie to check out.
Yeah.
Regardless of like whether you've seen international or English language, if you're a person who you think you've seen, you're just not disturbed very easily, this is a movie to check out.
Yeah, I'd say it's like medium to advanced difficulty.
Anyway, did it stay with you? So so normally this would be a question for next time because we intend to record immediately after watching.
Yeah, so we can get like the maximum like freshness of the take.
Here's what happened. We recorded immediately after watching, but I was drunk.
Yeah, we had to consume some substances to get through that one.
So yeah, that's how scary it was. Mm-hmm. But now that it's been a few weeks, did it stay with you?
It stayed with me. I wouldn't say that it stayed with me in a scary way. Like I was really scared watching the movie, and I thought maybe it was going to keep me up. Oh, sorry, I burped.
Burp media.
I thought it was maybe gonna like keep me up or give me nightmares, but it didn't. I slept very well afterwards, and I thought about it a lot in the days after, and I made connections and like thought about themes that I hadn't thought of before. So I'd say it stayed with me, but in a pleasant and interesting way, and not in a scary way, which is kind of interesting because I've seen movies that don't scare me while I'm watching them that will later keep me awake at night. So how about you? Did it linger for you?
Yes, it did stay with me, but also in a way where I really just appreciated it and I couldn't stop raving about it. I thought it was brilliant. And I think the reason I had that reaction and that connection with the film was because I watched it through my fingers and because I knew when to look away. So I didn't watch the scariest scenes in the film or the grossest scenes in the film because I knew when to cover my eyes. And in general, I was probably peering through a crack in my fingers just to read the subtitles, which is a benefit.
As we mentioned before.
Yeah.
Yeah, like subtitles kind of holds you captive a little bit.
Yeah. But I have promised going forward not to do that. Not that I will go in not knowing anything about the films.
Yay.
I won't do any research, so I will probably still watch through my fingers, but I won't know when to cover my eyes. That's just because I would like to sleep sometime in my lifetime. And if I had seen some of the scenes in this film, I would not. But
That's
because
fair.
I didn't, I loved it. And I couldn't stop talking about it. And I think it is an absolutely brilliant film. I can't wait to watch more by Demián Rugna. We're going to check out Terrified, and we're going to check out more Possession films.
Sweet.
Do you have any other fun facts you want to include?
Oh yeah, I do have a fun fact. Okay, so in the trailer for this film, like they really featured that scene with the goat, which I thought was going to be like a much larger part of the movie, but ended up like, I mean, it was like a scary scene.
It's funny. It happens kind of early on.
It happens early on.
I did not watch that scene.
Yeah. So back on the theme of like trailers not always really representing.
Do you want to briefly describe the scene, or is it not relevant, do you think?
I don't think it's relevant necessarily. I'll just say there's a goat. And it's creepy.
Watch the trailer if you're curious. Watch the trailer.
Yeah. I guess it wouldn't be too much of a spoiler because it's in the trailer, but I don't feel like it. So, and it just made me think about like, I don't know, there's something really unnerving about goats.
They have freaky eyes.
They have really freaky eyes. They're like weird rectangles, and they're like kind of soulless and cold and very alien looking. And so like goats have this like scary feeling about them, even though they're really derpy and sometimes like really adorable animals, you know, like everybody remembers like the screaming goats or like the fainting goats. Just
goat
like
yoga.
Well, although I don't know if a screaming goat is adorable. I think that's more kind of terrifying. Yeah, like actually I was like at a petting zoo one time, and this goat just like came up to me and started like munching on my shorts. So like they're really derpy, yeah, silly animals.
So
and
funny.
Like you said, like goat yoga is a thing. But I was curious, okay, like why do I find goats so scary? Why do they appear in so many scary movies and like depictions of the devil and demons and stuff like that? And like different parts of the occult, and like even in the hardcore music scene, there's a lot of like goat symbolism.
Goat media.
Yes, there are people involved in goat media in scary ways. And that actually, as I learned, goes back a very long time, like way longer than I expected, to at least 2300 BC. In like ancient Syria, I guess, like they used to take goats and just like totally bejewel them out with like necklaces and like jewelry and stuff, and then cast them out of the town on the day of the king's wedding.
So
and it was supposed to be this symbol of like casting out evil, like getting the evil out of the town in order for the king to have a good celebration. So
Did
even
they come
people
back? I guess it doesn't matter.
Well, maybe that's like a bad omen if they come back. I don't really know. But yeah, it's like interesting to me that like it's that far back, and maybe even further.
Yeah.
Like who knows? So that's really ingrained in human culture. I'd be curious to learn more about goat symbolism. I'm sure we'll have more opportunity to talk about it because it shows up in a lot of scary movies.
It really does.
How about you?
The witch, if you think about it.
Oh yeah, totally. The witch.
That was a great
Absolutely.
goat.
Yeah.
The goat.
The goat. Did you have any fun facts?
I guess I talked about the dog. I just really enjoyed reading the interview where the director talks about just working with animals. He talks about working with the dog, working with the goats, working with the car crash scenes, and he's just really unsatisfied. You know, he's critical of his work, which as an audience member was top notch.
Yeah, so I guess that like goes to show you a little bit that like even people at the top of their game are still self-critical. So love yourself.
If that's him working at what he does not consider his best, I can't wait to see what he considers the top of the top.
For real. Absolutely well done. So that brings us to the end of this episode. That was When Evil Lurks. We are so grateful that you are listening.
Have you seen it?
Tell us what you think. Did you like it? Did you hate it?
Does possession freak you out? How do you feel about possession?
How do you feel about goats? How do you feel about goat media? Are you involved in goat media?
Do you have any possession film recommendations? We would love it if you would rate the podcast and give us a review. Or you can follow us on Instagram or on Threads. Our handle is just horror/stories_pod. So horror/stories, that's all one word, _pod, POD.
So yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
We hope you have a phenomenal and spooky time.
Have a spooky time.
Have a spooky time.
My goats.
Roll theme song.
Do, 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 do.
Jesus Christ. We can't let anyone know that this was our second recording.